So what if I told you that using terms like black or white isn't a natural way of identifying people, but it's actually a tool? A tool invented to dominate, divide, and define people in the most simplistic way. That's what some people think, but that's not what I think. I think actually maybe it does have some division behind it, but it is a very useful and not hard to understand system that was created. So today we're going to break down exactly what terms like black and white mean, and are they harmful to society? Are they hard to understand? And everything else that people seem to have controversy around being black and white. Can you actually see is somebody actually the color black or white? Let's get into it. I'm Austin Holloman. Like the video, subscribe. Now, the first piece of evidence is the labels black and white didn't always exist the way how we use them in 2025. They were constructed during colonialism and slavery to justify power and separate the Europeans from everybody else that was considered black, and we'll define what that black means. Even today, these colors shape our reality. Who gets the privilege, who gets profiled, as you know, in the United States, and who is perceived to be more believable. And yet, some people would say biologically they're not real. And I disagree with this. And another example of this is Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie said, "I became black in America." In Nigeria, she wasn't black, she was Igbo. And that's how deep this will go. And I think this is a very ridiculous statement that she made, because I remember whenever she said this. And she says that, "I didn't know I was black until I went to America." Bullshit. You can look in the mirror and see exactly who you are, and you can look at white folks that come to Nigeria or on your TV and see that they are not like you. Now, what you meant to say was, "I didn't know what it was like to be black." Now, in Nigeria, yes, I could see that y'all may have more of a colorism issue, but you were very well aware that you're black. Black and white is not hard to understand. And if you want me to simplify it the best way I can, white is European descent. I think we can all agree on that. Black is African descent. You could be Igbo, you could be Kikuyu, you could be Black American, or whatever they call themselves now, FBA. You could be Afro-Latino. Those are all black people. And I don't know why the hell people seem to not understand this. So let's go back a little bit. Where does black and white come from? Where did these terms actually, where were they invented at? The terms black and white were created by colonizers, not to describe people, but to control them. And I can see why somebody would believe this. In ancient societies, people weren't grouped by skin color. Identity was based on tribe, religion, or nation. Race, as we know it, didn't exist. And I think this is a ridiculous statement as well, because it's very obvious that, yes, if you're talking about somebody from 30,000 years ago, the chances of them having contact on the African continent with Europeans was pretty much slim to none. The reason that people stopped identifying by tribes is because of globalization. Once colonists started to come in contact with these people from other parts of the world, of course, if you're British, white as you can be, and you go to South Sudan, that person to you does look black. And South Sudanese people are very black. Black as his couch, literally. So it makes a lot of sense why they would stop. Listen, they have to generalize an entire continent. The same way if I'm speaking about Europeans, I'm not going to sit here and name every fucking country in Europe and tribe. I'm going to name their white people. Because we can even say, "Oh, well, you're talking about French." Well, what? There was tribes in France at one point. Except, Europe, England used to be a lot of different kingdoms. We can go that far down, but we can generalize them as British people, and then narrow it down to white British people. We'll go on in that another part. By the 1600s, during the transatlantic slave trade, Europeans began labeling themselves as white, because they are white, and Africans as black, because they are black, to justify slavery and divide laborers. Now, this is true because they did use race, and they did say, well, yeah, these people are black. They are black, but they added to that black is inferior. And the word black had a negative connotation if you used to read the dictionary. If you guys have seen the movie about Malcolm X, where he read the dictionary and he read the definition of black, that really was a thing where they would systematically justify calling black people black to make them inferior, even down to the scholar and academic portions of the United States and other parts of the colonial world. After Bacon's, I think his name is Bacon's, after Bacon's rebellion in 1676, Virginia elites gave poor Europeans special privileges if they identified as white to separate themselves from enslaved Africans. And this is how the Irish became white. And this is how the Sicilians became white. They weren't considered white when they came to America, but in order for them to get a leg up in society, they had to consider themselves white. So some people like to say that race isn't real, but the effects are. But biologically, there's no such thing as black or white race, just human beings. But socially, these labels became very real. Now, I'm going to tell you why I disagree with this. Black people and white people do not have the same genetics. They are both humans, correct? But you see this hair on top of my head? You see this nose? First of all, I want you to show me a white person that has hair like mine. Genetically, we don't have the same hair. Genetically, we don't have, how many white people you know have noses like this? You may be able to find one, but on a general level, they don't have these noses. There are different genetics. Melanin is a genetic that white people don't have the same way how black people do. So yes, race does exist down to the scientific level and on the social level. 18th century scientists like Colonial and Blumenbach assigned colors to people and ranked them. White was seen as intelligent, moral, and black was seen as inferior, as I said before. These pseudo-scientific ideas gave Europeans the permission it needed to enslave millions and colonize half of the world, as I said before. Swedish taxonomist Linnaeus, I believe it's pronounced, literally called Europeans albus, which means white, and Africans niger, which means black, and claimed black people were lazy and ruled by emotion. As I said before, this black and white is a great way to simplify an entire continent or an entire race or ethnicity of people. But there is a problem whenever you throw people in boxes, and you can, especially during this time, it was easier to throw negative labels on top of them. So how did this term black and white spread globally? How did people normalize calling people black and white? The black and white labels started in Europe, but went global through colonization. And not every region saw them the same way. In Africa, people didn't see themselves as black until colonizers showed up. Of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. Identity was based on tribe and not color. It's the same way how it was everywhere else in the world. In Latin America, the racial system became more flexible with terms like pardo or mulatto or mestizo and reflected mixed ancestry, but black still carried the most stigma, which is the reason why they have blanqueamiento, which means whitening of the skin, whitening of the race, or mejor la raza, whatever you say it, where they want to whiten their bloodline by mixing with white men. The black women and men would actually go seek out white partners to whiten their skin. And this is how black and white can be a problem, because they use these and say, okay, well, whites are at the top. As I said in the video before, whites are at the top, mulattoes in the middle, blacks are always at the bottom, and I think natives might even be lower than them because they exterminated them. In Brazil today, people are categorized as preto, which means black, or pardo, which means brown, and branco, which means white. But darker skin still means less opportunity. And we already talked about this in a former video about the attack on blackness in Latin America. So go see that video in my Black Erasure playlist. So how did they treat this term black during the Civil Rights era? For centuries, black meant inferior, as I said before, but in the 1960s, black people flipped it, turning black into a badge of pride and power. I actually have a black power tattoo here on my arm, as you can see, to show that I don't give a damn about somebody calling me black. I'm black and I'm proud, and this term actually came out during this time. Activists like Stokely Carmichael rejected terms like Negro. Even though it was once a word of pride, Negro became replaced with the word black as a way to reclaim their identity. Movements across the United States, the Caribbean, and Africa began embracing the word black as a political identity against oppression. But in the Caribbean, they will identify with that. But in Africa, it's still an issue calling yourself black. They still say, hey, we're not black. We are this tribe or that tribe. And you're saying that because you're on the continent of Africa. But the minute you leave Africa, you are now black. Even in apartheid South Africa, Steve Biko called on all oppressed people, which were at that time Africans, Indians, and the coloreds, to unite under one identity, black. And if you know Indians, they do not identify with black today, so I don't know why he did that. Now, how did race of black and white become a social construct? Science today agrees race isn't based in genetics. It's a social idea that was built for profit and power. For example, American Anthropological Association declared race is not biological. It's a social invention tied to history and politics. I find half of truth in that because it is biological differences that black and white people have on average, in a general speaking sense, but it was used for power and politics. For example, you can't find any black Brazilians in the government. That is because they have a way of identifying them. Now, they can look at them and tell they're black, but that is a way of oppressing people. You guys know what I'm saying. Psychological studies show that the moment we label someone black or white, we consciously assign stereotypes. And some people like to say that that is true. I disagree. It comes down to a level of ignorance. How ignorant are you? For example, the Ku Klux Klan, they don't even really know why they hate black people. I've heard a member of them say that on YouTube one time, that they didn't really know why they hated black people, but they have those associated stereotypes with the word black when referring to people that makes them do the things that they do. Now, me, on the other hand, I'm not going to have pre-assumptions and judge you just because you're white or you're black. I know those stereotypes, but I don't apply those stereotypes when I'm interacting with you because I have a higher level of intelligence. So it goes down to how ignorant you are. Unfortunately, the majority of people watching this video may be ignorant. Maybe so. And everybody's not like me where they actually treat people equally. In one experiment, people were shown a racially ambiguous face. Once they were told he was black, they drew his features with exaggerated lips and nose. Now, this may have actually been some people's thought process, but if you want to think about it, I live in Africa, and I've already said before, on average, I don't have the typical big lips that Africans have or black African descent people in that fact have. But I'm not going to make it seem like their lips are not bigger than white people's lips. So I guess when you're white and you're looking at our lips, yes, to them, ours may be exaggerated. Now, there is a racist way of exaggerating those lips and nose whenever you draw photos. And you can see during the slave and Jim Crow era in the United States, if you look at paintings that they had of black people, the lips were so big, they might as well have had a bowl on their damn mouth. Or their nose might as well be a toy airplane sitting on them. That it is different. But we do, on average, have bigger lips and noses than white people. White people are known for damn near having no lips. So black and white means different things in different cultures. And I can tell you from living in Latin America and from living in the United States and now living in Africa, black does not necessarily mean the same thing. I find Latin Americans to be very delusional about what black means. For example, in the United States, we pretty much take anybody with somebody, you can look at see, for example, the way how I look at black is you should be able to look at somebody's face and see those features. There's certain giveaway features like hair. Like there's certain things that are just undeniable. You got enough black in your family where I can see it in your face. In Latin America, whenever they mix, and the real reason is because they don't want to be black so bad that they'll identify with mulatto or they'll identify with whatever other word of mixed race rather than identify with an African descent person called black. Another thing that they like to do in Latin America is deny that they have racism at all. And racism exists everywhere. Even here in Kenya, white people have experienced racism, obviously, because they're the standout and they view them as a colonizer, which they were. So, of course, they will face racism the same way how if black Americans go to anywhere in America or in Latin America, you can experience racism. Racism exists everywhere. Racism exists in China. So we're not going to make it seem like race does not exist if this stuff is happening everywhere. In Nigeria or Kenya, most people don't walk around calling themselves black, of course, because they pretty much have grown up around black people their entire time. You guys have heard me say whenever I first came to Kenya, I was not black. I'm just another person living in Kenya. In African countries, they worry about their ethnicity and nationality more than your race. But in places like France or South Asia, race isn't always tracked by law, but colorism and cultural bias still exists, and colorism is a global problem that we have. And one of the worst places in the world for this identity crisis is the Dominican Republic. I've never been, but I've met many of them, and they do have a delusion on what black is. Sometimes they're darker than me. They're as dark as a Haitian, and they don't want to be black. You guys remember they had a dictator. They used to paint his face white. That was a form of colorism and self-hatred as well, if you ask me. So what these Dominicans will say, even if they're as dark as a South Sudanese person, they'll say, I'm not black, I'm Dominican. Okay, I can say the same thing. Instead of you calling me a black American, I'm just going to call myself an American. That could mean a lot. You know, there's Kenyans that are white. They were born in Kenya. They have Kenyan citizenship. Their family has been in Kenya for over 100 years. But you know damn well you're not a real Kenyan. Like, you're white still. And that's why we have this identification system. And that leads me to my next point. Is that actually harmful or helpful to society? Some people say that black and white labels keep racism alive by oversimplifying who we are, and labels like black or white reduce billions of unique people into two boxes. Honestly, I don't really see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with generalizing stuff. I don't really see a problem with looking at a map of the world and then you point to Africa and say, this is where black people come from. I mean, it's true. I mean, what the hell else are you going to say? And if you point to Europe, this is where white people come from. Now, if you want to go further and narrow down to the tribe and all that, that's on you. But if I put, here's my question to some people, because there's some people that say they don't see race, right? If I put you in a room with somebody from Sweden and I put you in a room with somebody from South Sudan, would you have a problem figuring out which one is black or white? Oh, Austin, that's too extreme. Okay, if I put you in an olive skin tone Sicilian in the same room with a Ethiopian, would you have trouble identifying who is black? No, because they have different facial features. Even if the skin tone is very similar to each other, they have different facial features that let you know what race they belong to. On the other hand, some people say that this identification is necessary for unity, identity, and activism, which I would agree, especially when systems still treat you differently for having darker skin. Movements like Black Lives Matter use this term black not to divide, but to say this group matters because history said otherwise. For example, if you, the Black Lives Matter movement, which we can do another video about them, would not be relevant if race didn't exist. You have to have some label in order to unify and protest for Black Lives Matter. So just keep that in mind for people, especially the black people that say that they don't see race. So now that these labels are here, what do we do with them? So those terms black and white were made up in history, but the pain, pride, and power that go with these labels are very real, and you do know it, and it is undeniable. You can't solve racism by pretending race doesn't exist, as I said before. You solve it by knowing where these terms come from and deciding how to use them moving forward. Will you use them to discriminate against people, or will you just simply use them to identify people of a certain group? We will not be able to erase these labels, but we can choose what they mean. And more importantly, who gets to make the definition of these races? For example, like I said before, during the Jim Crow era, the people that wrote the dictionaries wrote a very negative connotation about what the term black meant and what the term white meant. This brings it back to a systematic understanding of that race can be used to just simply identify races, but not to oppress and demonize certain races. I hope you guys found my assessment of the terms black and white very real and very honest, and I hope you agree with me, because I truly believe that there's no other way to look at race besides black and white, especially after living in Africa now. And I know that everybody's not black and white. You have some people like Asians. I know they call them yellow. I don't know why. I've never seen a yellow person or anybody that's even close to that. But I don't look at, Asians as yellow. I look at them as just Asians, and some of them are dark and some of them are white. But living in Africa, you do learn very quick that you're either black or white. When it comes to them conning people, yeah, if you're like a light-skinned Indian, you're white to them. So you do start to understand that there's basically only two races once you move to the continent of Africa, black and white. Leave a comment on what you guys thought about that. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys next time.